everybody, this is the Vikstrand. So Alfred Hitchcock has done a bunch of very good movies. I reviewed a few of them here on my channel. But there are very few good Hitchcock remakes. Usually when these things comes out, the critics emerge from their bunkers and stuff like that and tells you that they're either unnecessary, lame or bad. And I agree with them, with the exception of one movie, and that is A Perfect Murder from 1998. The movie, which is the remake of Dial M for Murder, which we are going to take a look at today, starring Michael Douglas and Gwyneth Paltrow and Viggo Mortensen, was an almost fantastic movie. With the exception of the casting, this movie could have been almost as good as this one. I thought Michael Douglas was a little bit too old, and I thought Gwyneth Paltrow was a little bit too young to be playing, a married couple in that movie. It didn't work as well as it could have. Their characters was a little bit, wrongly written, and also Gwyneth Paltrow was a little bit uninteresting. This movie that we're going to take a look at today basically has the opposite problem, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's talk about one of Hitchcock's absolute best movies alongside Torn Curtain, one of the most underrated movies he has ever done, North by Northwest, Psycho, and a bunch of other great movies. But this one is one of my absolute favorite of his. This is Dial M for Murder. So we have this tennis player that is married to this wealthy woman played by Grace Kelly, and they live in London. And he finds out one day that she has been having an affair. And instead of asking for divorce or anything like that, he wants to plan the perfect murder for his wife. He has been talking about the perfect murder along with friends, when they're going out to dinner and things like that. And he's telling them, why has nobody cooked up this perfect murder and stuff like that. They do it in books and stuff like that, and they are telling him that the writer wants one thing and the reality wants another thing, but he believes that he can create this perfect murder using the man who has been banging his wife both as a scapegoat and a patsy at the same time, using a clever little scheme of blackmailing. Now, things does not go according to plan, and we have a dead body. And now the police are trying to figure out what has happened, while you are sitting there with all the answers, almost screaming at the screen, "Look over there, you fucking idiot!" And the rest of this movie, which is the vast majority of this movie, is actually the police trying to figure out what has happened to one single object: the key. The key is, well, the key to the entire case. And because it is so simple, it is also so effectively told, because we know everything and we have all the answers, we know all the twists. And as I said, we're sitting there knowing all the twists and all the turns in this movie, and somehow it works. I usually refer to this as know too much syndrome, when you know much more than the characters and they're just stumbling across in the dark, not figuring out anything. The worst example of this, and the most frustrating example of this, is probably the movie The Bourne Identity, which I am probably going to have to make a very frustrated review of one day. I think the movie is good, but it is just structurally very poorly. But that's a story for another time. So, if you think that the idea of a police officer searching for a key inside of an apartment sounds boring, it is not. They just ramp this thing up to absolute maximum fairly quickly, and because you know everything, the tension just goes up and up and up, and they add layers upon layers on this story as it goes on, and it just becomes kind of magical, because it is very deliberately slowly paced, because you are supposed to figure out everything that he's figuring out at the same time as he does it. You see how the cogs in his mind is sort of working, and he's trying to figure out, what have I missed? What is it that doesn't fit this picture? Because these movies seem to be free of logical loopholes, you can just sit back and just enjoy the movie without thinking, well, if he did that, why didn't this happen? Or if that happened, why didn't this happen? It is free from that sort of thing. It is an incredibly smart, deliberately slow but not boring movie. And I can understand that this was, based on a play, because, you get to know this apartment. You know every hook, nook and crane of this place, and you know, oh, there is this thing, and there is that thing, and there is this thing, and you get accustomed to the place. It actually feels weird when they, you know, venture outside, which they do a little bit in the middle and, you know, parts of the movie later, but we're mostly confined to this one location, which is very smartly done. And the only real problem I can see with this movie is the fact that outside of Grace Kelly, we don't have any, you know, interesting characters to attach yourself to. And the rest of the actors in this movie just seems a little bit bland, I guess. It is only Grace Kelly who is the really interesting actor and character in this movie. The rest of them are kind of, they're there. So, should you see this movie? Absolutely. It's one of Hitchcock's greatest, and I absolutely love this movie. Almost every minute of it. And if you have the opportunity to see this one in 3D, then do so. Yes. You know, in the mid-50s, it was a big, you know, crave for, you know, 3D movies. Some of them has been very, very carefully and nicely restored. This one being probably the crown jewel in the whole thing. This movie really shines in 3D. It makes a fantastic movie, this essentially, and you get a totally different feeling for the whole movie. It gives you this feel of depth that makes this movie look incredible. And if you have seen Dial M for Murder, I usually don't advise people to see the remakes, but this one is the exception. A Perfect Murder is not a perfect movie, but it is an almost perfect Hitchcock remake. And as I said, a really, really good movie. Dial M for Murder is a very simple concept, but at the same time, it is used to its absolute fullest. And it remains one of my favorite murder mysteries of all time, despite the fact that you know who has murdered who and why, and there is really not any mystery to it at all. But it's still so fascinating to follow the train of thoughts that, you know, the cops have, despite, you know, being a little bit clumsy sometimes. I think that it is so great. Outside of Grace Kelly's performance, very few actors really stands out in this movie, but she is fantastic, and this movie is pretty damn fantastic. I give Dial M for Murder 87 points. It's a fantastic thriller, and if you've never seen it before, I would strongly advise you to see it, because it is one of these classics that absolutely holds up, and it's almost your obligation to have seen it at least once. So I'll see you next time for Well So Instead of Reviewing Well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.